The snow fell like tiny frozen tears across what used to be the greatest city on Earth. Detroit had once roared with the sound of factories and the laughter of children playing in parks. Now it was nothing but broken concrete and twisted metal, all covered in a blanket of endless white. Malik pressed his back against a chunk of fallen building, trying to block the wind that cut through his thin jacket like a knife. His stomach had stopped growling days ago, which scared him more than the hunger itself. When you stop feeling hungry, that means your body is starting to give up. He was only 8 years old, but the last 3 months had aged him in ways that shouldn't happen to any child. His mama Keisha used to say he had the brightest smile in the neighborhood. His daddy David would ruffle his hair every morning before work and promise to teach him how to fix cars when he got bigger. His big sister Zara would sneak him extra cookies when mama wasn't looking. All gone now. The aliens came on a Tuesday. Malik remembered that detail clearly because Tuesdays were when mama made her famous cornbread. He was sitting at the kitchen table doing homework about fractions when the sky turned red. Not sunset red, but angry red, like the whole atmosphere was on fire. The ships appeared everywhere at once, massive black things that looked like angry storm clouds made of metal. They didn't come to talk or negotiate. They came to take everything. Water, minerals, oil, anything useful. And when humans tried to fight back, the aliens burned entire cities with weapons that turned buildings into glass. Malik survived the first attack because his school had an old bomb shelter from way back when people worried about nuclear war. 43 kids and 6 teachers huddled in that concrete box for 2 weeks, listening to the world end above them. When they finally emerged, half the city was gone and the sky had turned gray forever. Finding Mama and Daddy took 3 days of walking through rubble and calling their names until his voice went hoarse. He found them together in what used to be their living room, holding each other like they were sleeping. Zara was upstairs in her bedroom, still clutching the teddy bear he'd given her for her birthday. After that, Malik joined the other survivors in an old warehouse. There were maybe 60 people left from a neighborhood that used to have thousands. They shared canned food and took turns keeping watch, always talking about how help would come, how the government would send rescue teams. But weeks passed and no help came. The aliens had hit everywhere all at once. There was no government left to send anyone. People started leaving. First the ones with cars and gasoline. Then the ones brave enough to walk toward other cities, hoping to find somewhere better. The warehouse got emptier and emptier until only the old people and the very young remained. Then winter arrived early and harsh, like nature herself was angry about what had happened. The old people went first, their bodies too tired to fight the cold. Then the sick ones. Every morning Malik would wake up and count how many people were still breathing. Last week, it was just him and Mrs. Washington, an elderly lady who used to run the corner store. She told him stories about her grandson who lived in California, making plans for them to walk there together when spring came. But 3 days ago Mrs. Washington didn't wake up when he shook her shoulder. Now Malik was completely alone in a dead world, and the cold was winning its fight against his small body. His fingers had stopped working properly hours ago. His toes felt like blocks of ice inside his worn sneakers. The snow kept falling, each flake like another second ticking away from whatever time he had left. He closed his eyes and tried to remember summer. Playing basketball with Zara in their backyard. The smell of Daddy's cologne when he hugged him goodnight. The sound of Mama singing while she cooked Sunday dinner. But the memories felt distant now, like they belonged to someone else. A shadow passed overhead, different from the gray clouds that had covered the sky since the invasion. This shadow moved with purpose, circling like a bird of prey. Malik squinted upward through the falling snow, expecting to see one of the few remaining helicopters or maybe a scavenging drone. Instead he saw something impossible. The creature that descended was bigger than a school bus, with wings that seemed to catch and hold starlight even in the dim afternoon. Its scales shimmered like crystals, and its eyes burned with an intelligence older than human civilization. When it landed in the snow nearby, the ground trembled, but not with threat. With power held carefully in check. The dragon looked at the small, shivering boy and spoke without moving its mouth, its voice appearing directly in Malik's mind like warm honey. Malik woke up feeling warm for the first time in months. The surface beneath him wasn't the cold concrete he expected, but something soft that seemed to adjust to his body temperature. When he opened his eyes, he thought he was dreaming. The walls around him curved like the inside of a seashell, glowing with gentle blue light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Strange symbols floated in the air, changing colors as they drifted past. Through what looked like a window, he saw stars streaming by in ribbons of light, moving faster than anything should be able to move. "You are safe now, little one," came that same warm voice in his mind. Malik turned to see the dragon watching him with those ancient, knowing eyes. Up close, the creature was even more magnificent. Each scale caught light differently, creating patterns that shifted and danced across its hide. "Am I dead?" Malik asked, surprised his voice worked after so long in the cold. The dragon made a sound like gentle laughter. "Very much alive. My name is Ryzen and this is my ship. We are traveling between worlds, through what your people might call hyperspace." Malik sat up slowly, still weak but feeling stronger than he had in weeks. "Your ship doesn't look like any spaceship I've seen in movies." "That is because it is alive," Ryzen explained. "My people, the Drakmari, grow our vessels rather than build them. This ship was born from a seed I planted centuries ago, and it has been my companion ever since." As if responding to its name being mentioned, the walls around them pulsed brighter for a moment, and Malik could swear he felt something like curiosity touching the edge of his thoughts. "It's looking at me," he whispered in wonder. "She finds you fascinating. As do I." Ryzen settled more comfortably, folding his massive wings. "Tell me, young Malik, what do you know of the beings who attacked your world?" "They called themselves something that sounded like Kesvar or Kethvar. They had these big black ships and weapons that turned everything to glass." Malik's voice got quieter. "They took everything. Water, oil, even the fish from the oceans. Then they left us to freeze." Ryzen's eyes flared brighter. "The Kethvar are conquerors who have swept across this galaxy for 10,000 years. They arrive, they take what they want, and they leave nothing but empty worlds behind them. Hundreds of species have tried to fight them. All have failed. But we tried," Malik said, a spark of pride in his voice. "My dad was in the National Guard. He said humans never give up even when things look impossible." "Yes, you tried. And that is why I searched for survivors." Ryzen leaned closer, his voice filled with something like awe. "In 3 short years, humanity did something no other species has ever accomplished. You made the Kethvar retreat." Malik's eyes widened. "We won. Not won, but you fought so fiercely, so unpredictably, that the Kethvar decided Earth wasn't worth the cost. They had never experienced anything like human determination before. Stories of your resistance have spread across every star system in the galaxy." The ship suddenly shifted course, and through the window, Malik saw other vessels joining them. Some looked like massive birds made of crystal, others like flowing water held together by light. All of them carried the same scaled beings he now knew as Drakmari. "Where are we going?" Malik asked. "To gather others like you. My people have been searching for human survivors across dozens of worlds. The Kethvar scattered your species, but they could not destroy your spirit." Over the next several days, Malik watched in amazement as they collected other humans. There was Darius, a teenager from Los Angeles who had been found drifting in a damaged space pod. Valencia, a middle-aged woman from Miami who had somehow survived on a mining asteroid. Jackson, a boy around Malik's age who had been living in the ruins of Chicago. Each rescue brought new stories of survival against impossible odds. Valencia had jury-rigged life support systems using nothing but spare parts and determination. Jackson had taught himself to avoid alien patrols by moving through subway tunnels. Darius had actually stolen a Kethvar shuttle and tried to fight back before his weapons ran out. "Do you see the pattern?" Ryzen asked Malik privately as they watched the humans share their stories. "Each of you survived by adapting, by finding solutions that no textbook could have taught you." Malik was beginning to understand. "We're good at making things up as we go?" "More than good. Extraordinary. My people spend decades learning to interface with our biotechnology. Watch this." Ryzen guided Malik to a control panel covered in living circuits that pulsed with soft light. "Place your hand here and think about moving forward." Malik hesitated, then pressed his palm against the warm surface. The moment he thought about going faster, the ship responded, accelerating smoothly through space. The other humans gathered around, amazed, as Malik instinctively understood controls that should have taken years to master. "Impossible," Valencia whispered. "How did you do that?" "I don't know," Malik admitted. "It just felt right." Ryzen's mental voice was filled with excitement. "This is why I search for you. Humans don't just adapt to new situations, you evolve to meet them. Your minds work differently than any species we have encountered." As their journey continued toward the Drakmari homeworld, Malik began to realize that being rescued was just the beginning. Something bigger was happening here, something that would change not just his life, but maybe the fate of the entire galaxy. The Drakmari homeworld took Malik's breath away. Floating cities made of living crystal stretched across purple skies, connected by bridges of pure light that dragons flew between like highways in the air. Mountains grew upward in impossible spirals, their peaks disappearing into clouds that sparkled with their own inner fire. "Welcome to Ethermore," Ryzen said as their ship descended toward the largest floating platform. "Home to the greatest academy in the galaxy." The Celestial Academy looked like someone had taken a cathedral and taught it how to dream. Towers twisted toward the sky in graceful curves, their surfaces shifting between colors Malik didn't have names for. Students flew between buildings on wings of energy, while others walked on pathways that formed beneath their feet as they moved. Malik's group of human survivors stood together, feeling very small and very lost. They'd been given clothes that adjusted to fit their bodies and translated the dragon language into words they could understand, but everything still felt overwhelming. "The young dragons are staring at us," Valencia whispered nervously. She was right. Everywhere they looked, young Drakmari students watched them with curious, sometimes unfriendly eyes. Some whispered among themselves in rapid dragon speech that their translators couldn't keep up with. Their first instructor was an ancient dragon named Solaris, whose scales had turned silver with age. Her mental voice was crisp and no-nonsense, like a strict teacher who'd seen everything twice. "So, these are the legendary humans," she said, circling around them slowly. "I was expecting something more impressive." Jackson stepped forward, his young face determined. "We may not look like much, but we're still here. That counts for something." Solaris made a sound that might have been amusement. "Spirit at least. Very well, let us see what you can actually do." The first lessons were disasters. The humans struggled with basic meditation techniques that dragon children learned before they could fly. When asked to commune with the living crystals that powered the academy, most of them got nothing but pretty lights. The mathematical concepts behind dimensional travel made their heads hurt. "Perhaps we were wrong about their potential," Solaris confided to Ryzen after a particularly difficult class. "They seem to lack the mental discipline for advanced studies." But Ryzen wasn't discouraged. "Give them time. Humans learn differently." The breakthrough came during a practical problem-solving session. The students were given a damaged starfighter simulator that hadn't worked properly in decades. The dragon students approached it methodically, running diagnostic after diagnostic, following procedures that had been established for centuries. The humans looked at it for maybe 5 minutes before Darius crawled underneath and started pulling out parts. "What are you doing?" demanded Kithra, a young dragon student with golden scales. "You can't just start removing components without understanding the system architecture." "Sure I can," Darius replied, his voice muffled from inside the machinery. "Valencia, hand me that crystal thing. Jackson, see if you can reroute power through that blue cable there." "This is chaos," Kithra complained to her friends. "They'll destroy it completely." But within an hour, the simulator hummed to life for the first time in 50 years. The dragon students stared in amazement as Malik climbed into the pilot seat and successfully completed a training run that most of them had failed multiple times. "How?" Solaris asked, genuinely puzzled. "The navigational matrix was completely scrambled." Malik shrugged. "I didn't use the navigation system. I just looked where I wanted to go and went there." "That's impossible. You can't fly through hyperspace on instinct alone." "Maybe you can't," Valencia said with a small smile. "But humans have been figuring things out as we go for thousands of years." Word of the simulator incident spread quickly through the academy. Soon, other instructors were bringing the humans problems that had stumped dragon scholars for years. A quantum mathematics puzzle that Jackson solved by drawing pictures instead of using equations. A diplomatic crisis between two alien species that Valencia resolved by getting them to share stories about their grandchildren. But it was Malik who truly amazed everyone. During an advanced starship piloting class, he was asked to navigate through an asteroid field using a ship he'd never seen before. The dragon students spent 20 minutes studying the controls and memorizing safety procedures. Malik sat down, placed his hands on the bioneural interface, and flew through the course like he'd been born to it. He didn't just avoid the asteroids, he danced between them, making the massive ship move like it was alive. "Incredible," breathed the instructor, an ancient dragon named Cosmos. "In 300 years of teaching, I've never seen natural piloting ability like this." The other human survivors were developing their own amazing abilities. Darius could fix any piece of technology, even if he'd never seen it before, just by looking at how energy flowed through it. Valencia discovered she could communicate with almost any species by finding common emotional ground. Jackson developed an intuitive understanding of hyperspace that let him plot courses through areas that dragon navigators considered impossible. But the real change came in how they worked together. Dragon students traditionally competed with each other, trying to prove individual superiority. The humans automatically collaborated, building on each other's strengths and covering for weaknesses without even thinking about it. They function as a collective intelligence, Solaris reported to the Dragon Council, her earlier skepticism replaced by fascination. Each individual human is remarkable, but together they become something unprecedented. As months passed, the hostile stares from Dragon students turned to respect, then to friendship. Kithra, who had initially dismissed the humans as primitive, became Malik's closest friend at the academy. She taught him Dragon history and culture, while he showed her human concepts like improvisation and creative problem-solving. "Your people are going to change everything," she told him one evening as they watched the sunset paint the crystal cities in shades of gold. "The galaxy has never seen anything like humans before." Malik smiled, remembering the scared, freezing boy Ryzen had found in the snow. That seemed like a lifetime ago now. 5 years had passed since Malik first arrived at the academy as a freezing, frightened child. Now 17, he stood nearly 6 feet tall with muscles earned from dragon combat training and eyes that held the quiet confidence of someone who had learned to fly between stars. The scared little boy was gone, replaced by a young man who moved with purpose and spoke with authority that made even ancient dragons listen. But peace was about to shatter. The alarm crystals throughout Ethermore began screaming their warning song at dawn. Malik shot up from his bed, instantly alert. That sound meant only one thing: enemy ships approaching the outer defenses. In the Academy's command center, holographic displays showed the nightmare that every dragon had feared for generations. Hundreds of Kethvar vessels emerged from hyperspace like black daggers cutting through reality itself. Their ships had evolved since Earth's destruction, becoming sleeker and deadlier, bristling with weapons that could crack moons in half. "They're back," whispered Kithra, her golden scales pale with fear. "After all these years, they've finally come for us." Elder Solaris stood at the center of the War Council, her silver scales reflecting the red warning lights. "Our outer patrol fleets are engaging them now, but early reports are troubling. Their tactics have changed. Evolved." Malik studied the tactical displays with eyes trained by 5 years of military strategy classes. What he saw made his stomach clench with worry. The Kethvar weren't using their old aggressive charges anymore. Instead, they moved like a coordinated swarm, adapting to every defensive maneuver the dragons attempted. "They learned from fighting us humans," he said quietly. "They've become more flexible, more creative in their approach." The first major battle lasted 18 hours and ended in disaster for the Drakmari forces. 3 full dragon squadrons were destroyed, their commanders outmaneuvered by tactics they'd never encountered before. The Kethvar had studied every dragon battle formation recorded over the past 1,000 years and developed counters for each one. In the aftermath, as wounded dragons limped back to the floating cities, the Dragon Council called an emergency meeting. The great crystal hall filled with ancient voices raised in heated debate. "We need to retreat to the inner systems and regroup," argued one elder. "Impossible," growled another. "If we give them time to establish staging areas, they'll overwhelm us completely." "Perhaps we should consider surrender negotiations," suggested a third, his voice barely above a whisper. That's when Malik stood up. At 17, he was by far the youngest being in the hall, but when he spoke, the ancient dragons fell silent. "With respect, you're all thinking like dragons," he said, his human voice carrying clearly through the vast space. "You're trying to fight them the same way you've fought every enemy for the past millennium. But the Kethvar aren't the same enemy anymore. They've learned to think differently." "And what would you suggest, young human?" asked Elder Cosmos, his tone not unkind but clearly skeptical. Malik activated a holographic display showing the scattered human survivors who had been gathered from across the galaxy over the past 5 years. There were now over 200 of them, trained in dragon technology but still thinking with human minds. "Deploy us," he said simply. "The Kethvar think humanity is extinct. They've never planned for fighting an enemy they believe they already destroyed. Let's use that." The debate that followed was intense. Many dragons argued that using the humans would be sending them to certain death. Others pointed out that traditional dragon tactics had already failed spectacularly. It was Ryzen who cast the deciding vote. "The boy is right. We need tactics the enemy cannot predict. And there is no species in the galaxy better at improvisation than humans." 3 days later, Malik found himself leading the strangest military unit ever assembled. His team included Darius, now a master of alien technology who could turn any piece of equipment into a weapon. Valencia had become an expert at psychological warfare, understanding enemy motivations better than they understood themselves. Jackson had evolved into a navigation genius who could plot courses through areas of space that shouldn't exist. Their first mission was a strike against a Kethvar supply convoy moving through the asteroid fields of the Proxima system. Instead of the traditional Dragon approach of overwhelming force, Malik's team used pure human unpredictability. They split up and attacked from 6 different directions simultaneously. Darius had rigged captured Kethvar technology to explode at precisely the right moments, creating chaos in the enemy formation. Valencia broadcast confusing signals that made the Kethvar think they were facing a much larger force. Jackson led their escape through a route that the enemy's computers said was impossible to navigate. The convoy was destroyed completely with 0 human casualties. The effect on Kethvar morale was immediate and devastating. For the first time in their species' history, they faced an enemy that refused to follow predictable patterns. Human strike teams began appearing everywhere, hitting targets that should have been impossible to reach, using tactics that made no sense according to established military doctrine. How are they doing this? Intercepted Kethvar communications showed their growing panic. These humans are supposed to be extinct. How can dead enemies be attacking us? Each successful mission made the Kethvar more cautious, more paranoid. They began holding back forces to guard against attacks that might come from any direction at any time. Their advance slowed, then stopped, then began to reverse as they pulled ships back to defend previously secure positions. Malik's reputation spread through both fleets. Dragon commanders who had initially dismissed him as too young now sought his advice on strategy. Kethvar intelligence reports labeled him as their primary target, a development that would have terrified him 5 years ago but now just made him smile grimly. The war was far from over, but for the first time since the invasion began, the galaxy's defenders had hope. Humanity might have been scattered and nearly destroyed, but they had found their role in the larger conflict. They were the chaos that made order possible, the unpredictability that could break any plan. The final battle would be fought at the Nexus of Worlds, an ancient space station the size of a small moon where dozens of hyperspace routes converged. For 10,000 years, it had served as a neutral meeting ground for different species. Now the Kethvar had claimed it as their ultimate stronghold, turning its peaceful halls into a fortress bristling with weapons. Malik stood on the bridge of the flagship Star Weaver, no longer the frightened child Ryzen had found in Earth's snow. At 18 he bore the dragon title Star-Touched, an honor given to only 7 beings in Drakmari history. The crystal crown on his forehead pulsed with the same rhythm as his bonded partner's heartbeat, connecting him to Ryzen in ways that went beyond mere friendship. Around them, the largest fleet ever assembled prepared for what everyone knew would be the war's final confrontation. Dragon battlecruisers floated alongside human-modified fighters, their bioluminescent hulls creating a light show that rivaled the nearby nebula. 200 human pilots sat in cockpits designed for their unique abilities, while their dragon partners prepared to dive into combat that would determine the galaxy's future. Final intelligence reports, announced Valencia, now serving as the fleet's strategic coordinator. Her voice carried across the command bridge with the authority of someone who had earned respect through 5 years of impossible victories. The Kethvar have concentrated their entire armada at the Nexus. Over 3,000 ships including their command vessels. Darius looked up from his technology station, where he'd been analyzing captured enemy equipment. The bad news is they've adapted to most of our previous tactics. The good news is I've figured out how to turn their own weapons against them, but it'll require getting inside their defensive perimeter. That's suicide, protested Kithra, her golden scales dim with worry. Their close-range defenses are impenetrable. Malik studied the tactical display, watching the swirling patterns of enemy ships around the ancient station. Something about their formation bothered him, like a puzzle with a missing piece he couldn't quite identify. They're not just defending, he realized suddenly. Look at the positioning. They're preparing to launch simultaneous attacks on every major world in the galaxy. If we don't stop them here, they'll spread out and finish what they started with Earth. The weight of responsibility settled on his shoulders like a physical force. Every surviving human, every dragon world, every species that had ever dreamed of freedom depended on what happened in the next few hours. All units begin the assault, Malik ordered, his voice carrying across hundreds of ships. Remember, we're not just fighting for victory. We're fighting for the right of different species to exist together. The battle that followed defied every rule of space warfare. Dragon fighters swooped through enemy formations like living meteors while human pilots performed maneuvers that made physics teachers weep. Jackson led a squadron through dimensions that didn't technically exist, appearing behind enemy lines in places the Kethvar thought were impossible to reach. But the enemy had learned too. For every human trick they had developed a counter. For every dragon strategy they had prepared a response. The battle raged for hours with neither side gaining a decisive advantage, and casualties mounted on both sides. It was during the darkest moment, when it looked like the alliance might actually lose, that Malik made a choice that surprised everyone, including himself. Instead of ordering another attack, he opened communication channels to every ship in the battle zone, human, dragon, and Kethvar alike. "This is Malik Chin of Earth speaking to all forces," he broadcast. His words carried across space, translated into every language by technology that Darius had modified just for this moment. "I want to tell you all a story about a little boy who was dying alone in the snow." On bridges across the battle zone, beings paused to listen. Even the Kethvar, driven by hive mind curiosity, stopped firing to hear what this legendary human had to say. 5 years ago, I thought I was the last human alive. I was 8 years old, freezing to death in the ruins of my home, certain that my species was finished. But a dragon found me. Not because he had to, but because he chose to believe that cooperation was stronger than conquest. As he spoke, something unprecedented began happening. Human ships started moving into protective formations around damaged dragon vessels. Dragon fighters began covering human retreat paths. The cooperation wasn't ordered from above, it emerged naturally from soldiers who had learned to trust each other completely. The Kethvar tried to eliminate chaos from the galaxy, Malik continued, his ship moving steadily toward the enemy command vessel. But chaos isn't the enemy of order. Chaos is where new possibilities are born. Watch us fight together and tell me that diversity makes us weak. The demonstration that followed broke something fundamental in the Kethvar collective consciousness. They watched human pilots sacrifice themselves to save dragon wingmates who belonged to a completely different species. They saw dragons sharing their life force to power human weapons, giving pieces of their own souls to beings they had known for only a few years. For a hive mind species that valued perfect unity above all else, the sight of such cooperation between fundamentally different forms of life was incomprehensible. How could beings who thought differently, looked different, and came from different worlds work together more effectively than a perfectly synchronized collective? "We don't understand," came a transmission from the Kethvar flagship, the first time in their species' recorded history that they had initiated diplomatic contact during active combat. "How do you achieve unity without uniformity?" Malik found himself smiling as he prepared to answer the question that would change everything. "We don't achieve unity. We celebrate our differences and let them make us stronger. Want us to show you how?" The negotiations that followed lasted 3 days and resulted in something unprecedented, a galaxy-wide alliance based not on conquest or submission, but on the radical idea that different species could learn from each other. The Kethvar, their worldview permanently altered by what they had witnessed, became not enemies but students, eager to understand how cooperation could create strength they had never imagined possible. In the years that followed, as humans served as bridges between species throughout the galaxy, Malik would often remember that moment when everything changed. The boy who had cried alone in Earth's nuclear winter had become the herald of a new age, proving that humanity's greatest gift wasn't their stubbornness or their technology. It was their ability to see the best in others and bring it out, creating harmony from difference and turning diversity into the galaxy's greatest strength.